Okay, hello. So I'm Joanne-Aśka, and this is Tom.
I'm Tom.
So we will be presenting the Choice VR, which is and we will be talking both about our creative process. So this is VR documentary, and we will tell you our approach to creative aspect, to some narrative tools that we are using, and also talk about our very unique stereoscopic volumetric capture tech, and some other technical aspects. And we want to say that we are two people's team, very small team. And both with the project and with whenever we work together, we have always two different areas to cover. So I'm usually creative and director, and Tom is creative and responsible for technology. And we always work together because we find that technology and creative has to be in synergy. So whatever I want to say with the project, with the Choice project, I need to find the tools for it. And Tom is helping me to bring the message and not to also overwhelm the project with too many not necessarily high tech, but gimmicky stuff that would take attention from the issue itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So you want to give the introduction? Yeah. So about our company. So we're just, like I said, a two-person company, and our background is in film production and visual effects, and we're both camera people, and I have extensive experience in camera department, but also in visual effects. There was this big Canada 150 project that some of you might have heard of, where it was this big planetarium that was traveling around, and it had a live-action film projected in it, so we have experience in 360 video. And all of that kind of painted what we wanted our project to be from our experiences with those things.
But also another thing, so you probably hear with my accent that I'm still pretty fresh immigrant in Canada. And before I came here, I used to be, I started directing and I did some short stuff that were on festivals. When I came here, I had a very tricky situation with visa, so the company that invited me went bankrupt 1 week after my landing. So I had to pretty much do everything to survive. And I was doing all kinds of jobs on set. But this is now coming very handy because we are working on the documentary. And working on the documentary, you are doing so many things alone, and you have to be able to react to so many situations. So now having this experience, it's really helpful. And yeah, we are based in Toronto, but work on projects everywhere pretty much. And so the Choice is the project that is still in development, and it's interactive VR experience that allows you to meet real people who had abortion, and they share their experiences with you. And the most important aspect and the goal of the project is to fight with stereotypes. What happened?
There it goes.
Okay. Yeah. So there is a lot of stereotypes and stigma surrounding abortion, and me being both sociologist and also analyzing that debate, I very deeply believe that the best way to fight with stereotypes is to meet in person, talk eye to eye, and just be with somebody and meet this person. So that's why the main idea and the core idea for the Choice is to introduce realistic people, real people in realistic way. But we also use various storytelling techniques and narrative tools to make the user / viewer / I don't have a proper word for it, engaged. Because with entering the VR space, we are not the viewers anymore. We are not passive. There is no window. We are in the experience. And it's both calling for some, not necessarily big agency, like one of my favorite examples of just acknowledging the person watching VR is the, what's the name? Invasion. And you enter the VR and there's some little rabbit, or I don't remember, the little white cute thing, and it's running around and you're looking at it, and suddenly it looks at you. And you are instantly there. And you do nothing, it just looked at you, and you are instantly there. So we are thinking about some stuff to put you there as well in the experience. And I just don't have the word if it's a viewer, player, user.
Participant, maybe.
Participant, yeah. So while working on this project, we started around 2 years ago with very heavy political situation in my home country. And since then, I've heard probably all kind of advice what the experience should be about, who should interviews with, how cool technological stuff should I introduce, and just to name some of these things. So for example, to use some, I don't know, haptic belly to make you feel the baby kicking. And I'm laughing, but it's pretty gruesome thing to hear. So I don't want to traumatize anybody. I don't want to shock anybody. And my whole goal is to create the safe space for discussion, both for people to share their stories and for you to safely, privately hear what they have to say. And the phrase also that I keep hearing is that because we define it as a documentary, we keep hearing that as a documentarian, you should do that. As a documentarian, that more neutral stuff would be that. So as a documentarian, let me tell you how I define the documentary. So motion picture is a type of continuum between the cinema and journalism, and documentary is somewhere in the middle of it. And cinema creates the fictional world and invites you to it, and it shows this world through some window, and the way that this window is framed works with your emotions, works with how you feel. And then another end of this continuum is news and journalism, and their goal is to show the as realistic thing as possible, no magic, nothing in mystery, just pure realism. And and the documentary. So some people define it and perceive it as a kind of visual Wikipedia, that there is some phenomenon and you have to show it from all the angles, everything that's known about it. But for me, it is not Wikipedia, it is rather a lens that I choose to look through. So I choose some aspect of the world that I find myself important, and I look through it. And it's very much, it's not neutral, and some people think it's wrong, but I think the only thing that matters is to be honest with myself and my viewers, to show you which lens I am choosing, why, and then just to follow with that. And the question now is, what is my lens and what is my approach? And how do we handle this very delicate and controversial subject? So one of the most important things that I've observed is that the abortion debate is very heated. And our project is very much pro-choice. Our stand is very much pro-choice, with no question, with no comments, with no judgment. But I also observed that both sides of the debate are very vocal, very argumentative, very heated. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to also, I don't think that there is also anything more to add, because the debate has been here since centuries or even longer, and there is really nothing new that I can say. But there is one very important aspect that is missing, and I don't see it enough, and these are people. So these are people who went through it and who have some experience with it. And don't sweat. Don't strain my. Yeah.
What is the next slide?
Yeah, it is next slide. And as I said before, the showing people and talking to people is the only way to actually work with stereotypes. Okay. And then, so that one of the most, so I run social media for the project. I talk to many people, both dealing with abortion, but also anti-choice people. And one of the most common myths about abortion is that abortion is against motherhood. And one of about 60% people who have abortion are already mothers. So now imagine not reading this in a book, in the newspaper, but talking to this person in the middle who has 2 children, she had abortion. Talking to Kristen that's on the left, and she has very upsetting situation because she was waiting for her child, and she does not call it fetus, she calls it a child, because she was waiting for it with her husband, and the doctor didn't tell them that something is wrong. And it was in Texas, and in Texas the law is that you can do abortion up to, I don't remember which week, but up to a certain time. And the doctor, seeing that something is wrong, didn't tell them. He just wanted to wait for the time when it will be illegal, and then he wanted to tell them, hey, you know what, you have a problem. But luckily enough, she saw something in his eyes, and she just went to another doctor, and another doctor gave her this list of abnormalities with the baby. And she had 4 days to decide what's next. And the baby inside her was dying, she was dying, and now hear it from her. Not from me, not read it, just hear it from her. So I hope that taking this kind of stories, I can just make you think, and that's the whole goal of the project. And I need a second to sip. Yeah. So hearing those stories is the most important part, but many of you cannot actually identify with my subjects. And even for me, listening to these stories, you probably hear it now because I'm just thinking about it again, it's very emotional. And I don't want to just throw it at you and make it sit and listen and like feel how gruesome it is. I don't want that. And I also want to make you feel that is this kind of something about you as well. And with that reason, we make it your experience. So when you put the headset on, the story starts with you seeing suddenly that you are in somebody's body and mind, and you discover that you are inside of a person who is thinking, who just learned that she is pregnant, and she's not sure what to do next. And on her way, actually is looking for some answers, for some information, and like in real life, which whatever decision we have to make, we go to talk to our friends, to family. So she's going to talk to some people, and this is the way to introduce the interviewed people that I talked about earlier. And so this is one aspect. Another aspect, when you meet these people and they start sharing their experiences with you, I don't want it to be passive. So I don't want, again, to just have this speech and you just sit and listen and you're probably frozen. I first introduce a little bit part of the story, and then you take part in the conversation, and the conversation is interactive. So you hear a little bit, and then you see few questions, and you can choose which question you want to hear the answer to. So for example, some of you may want to hear how the procedure looks like. Some of you may want to hear what your mom said, or did your partner go with you? Was it, I don't know, hard to make the choice, or was it easy? And whichever question you want to hear answer to, you just look at it, and then it goes. And also it's, another part of it is that you can choose to hear the whole story, or you can choose to hear just parts, and you can just finish whenever you think that, okay, that's too much, or that's already like, yeah. So that's that. And also, so the most important part of course, interviews, and we will soon tell you about the technology, how we make them look as lifelike as possible. But some stuff about VR space. So VR is a mess, and usually when I watch VR experiences, there is a lot of clutter, there is a lot of information that I don't really need. And we decided initially to start with just black void, and this is our first prototype. It was just a person and black void. And, but we also want to, so we want to make this space first to make you focus, concentrate on the person, feel the privacy, feel that you are in some safe and closed space. But then also we want to affect your emotions. And there is some study showing, and also a lot of our research and intuition, that if you are in clutter space, in a space that has too much visual information, you just keep looking around. And in this Stanford study, you can see that the lady is supposed to look at the person. It was actually also an emotion story, so he was going through some personal experience and then he wanted to commit suicide, but she does not care. She's looking at the notebook that is there. And she's doing that because whenever we are introduced to any virtual space, we find it important enough that we want to see it all and check it all. But it's also a lot of experiences and a lot of like playing games and stuff. We keep expecting that something will pop out, or the notebook that is on his bed, maybe there is something important there, maybe he wrote something, should I look at it? And so we have this detective mode / fear of missing out, and we just keep looking. So that's why with our process, we only capture the realistic people, and everything else initially is black. But another important aspect is, and the same Stanford study showed it, that people remember much better the information that if you have only the angle, some angle part of the sphere, then you remember better, but you do not understand emotionally who is the person. So in this scene, the lady again was looking at the person and she remembered his name, his age, whatever was his life story, but she did not know why he's really wanting to commit suicide. She was like, what? But when then they did exactly the same scene and they did the whole 360 degrees, she didn't much remember, again, what's his name and any other factual stuff, but she understood why he's doing it. And that's very important information for us because we want you to understand the people that you will be talking to, and we want you to emotionally understand who they are and why they are making the choices that they are making. So our big question was how to do it, how to use both 360 space to connect you emotionally, but make you focus only on the person. And our very big inspiration was Dear Angelica by Oculus Studio. And we want to do similar things, so to use virtual spatial dynamic illustrations, bring them in and out from the black void, and to keep the focal point on the person who is the main subject, but also to use the whole space to put you into, so our example is that one of the people that we were talking to, she had abortion in, I think, 60s, before Roe v. Wade in America, New York, when it was still illegal. And then her sister also had abortion. And they were doing it in their kitchen, and it was like forbidden, nobody should know, so they were doing it in the kitchen, very tiny on the back at the house, and she already had a child, and there was like 5 people in this kitchen, crying baby, doctor, husband, sister, her, and so we want to do it with the illustration that you are first in the kitchen when she's talking, you are in the same kitchen, and that these walls keep closing on you, and then you feel what she was feeling, that like these walls are closing on you in also metaphorical way. There's also one phenomenon that we recognize. So there is a lot of talk about presence in VR, but it usually we talk about presence of you being there. We understand it as a like kind of double bipresence of, first of all, you being in the VR space and the person you are talking to being there with you. So you have the impression and then create memory of actually having this conversation. And there are 2 technical aspects to achieve that. So first of all is natural interaction with environment, which is 60OF, and another is looking alive, and both of this stuff Tom will now talk about.
So I guess I don't need to give a rundown on what volumetric video is, but if there are some people that missed the great Intel talk, essentially volumetric video is video that has spatial data. So you can see that there's a wonderful representation of our cat, but it's frames, sequential frames that you've captured of reality that have spatial information. And that's how we wanted to conduct our interviews and record our subjects. And we first were looking at, well, what are the enabling technologies for that? And the first obvious thing to look at would be something like light stage or photogrammetry, which is, for example, how the Intel studios function. And there was a lot of problems for our particular needs with this setup, is that obviously it's large studios that have to be purpose-built and they're expensive to operate. Like, for example, I don't know what the Intel studio costs to operate, but like the similar thing like Microsoft Mixed Reality, you're looking at $10,000 a finished minute. And besides that, it's a complex system. And beyond all of that, the subjects themselves look kind of waxy and dead-eyed, even though that they might be high fidelity and high quality. There's something about their presence that doesn't really translate to being a human person. And it also seems like an incredible amount of work to record the back of people. Like, I don't know how many of you in the audience have any idea what the back of us looked like and if it's relevant to the presentation. In some instances, in a disco party, absolutely, but for us, it wasn't necessary to go through that. And then, of course, there's the idea of performance capture, which has a lot of the same issues, but there's another aspect that is not unique, but it is something that is a point about documentary, which is supposed to be representing reality. If you have something that is an abstraction of reality, so you don't actually have the real person, you have a performance that you captured that's puppeting something else, you're getting into kind of an ethical problem. Like, what is an actual emotion, what is an actual expression from a person, and what is simply a interpretation of it from the process. And then, of course, there's a really great tool set called Depth Kit, which has been used for quite a lot of things, including documentary, and it's affordable, and it's been involved with a lot of great projects, but its aesthetic that it's typically used as is kind of like a hologram. And for the subject matter of our project, that's not really how we want to represent our subjects. You know, we don't want them to look like a hologram. We don't want them to look like a ghost. So we had to focus on what's important for us. And our subjects are seated so that they're relaxed because they're being interviewed. And that also means that our participants, our viewers, are seated as well, which also relaxes them. And because we don't need the full geometry, we only really need to capture what the observer, the participant in the experience is going to see. That reduces what we need to capture in volume. And another important aspect is because it's a documentary and because we're dealing with non-performers, we need to be able to record unstructured for very long periods of time. We can't just say, okay, go into this giant studio, this green Vitamix blender, stand on the mark, and say your life story for 2 minutes before we have to cut and transfer to the data center. It needs to be, okay, we're going to record unbroken for 4 hours. And that beyond all of these things, the faces themselves need to be believable and lifelike. And our background is in stereography. And stereography is how we, most people anyway, if you have both of your eyes, see the world. And we have binocular vision, and the binocular vision gives us information about parallax between two objects. So you know if one eye sees one object and the same object in the other eye, and the separation between the two gives you depth perception. And stereography is the recreation of this effect through other means, which would be capturing two images and presenting them, you know, with 3D glasses on a screen. But this is only a particular part of our vision, and it's an overly thought of part of our understanding of our binocular vision. There's something else called retinal rivalry or binocular rivalry, and that's something where an eye sees one thing that another eye sees differently or not at all. And this is actually an analogy that I've been using since Avatar to explain why when you convert something to 3D, it doesn't actually, you're not doing stereo correctly. So here's a very exciting stereoscopic image of a lemon, and it may not typically, you know, see how this is explained in stereo, but you have a left and right image, and you can see that as it flips between, there are the marks and pits on the surface change in parallax from one eye to another, and that separation would tell your brain how far away the front of the lemon is, how far away the back of the lemon is, how it rolls off on the side to being a round shape. But when you look at the specular highlight on the lemon, you can see that the highlight is actually completely different in each eye. The glare in the pits is completely different in each eye. Some pits you can see into, some that you can't. You can't see one set of pits on one side of the lemon, and you can't see them on the other side of the lemon. And those are the occlusion between the two. And all of these things are incredibly important clues to tell you that this lemon is waxy, it's shiny, and that the surface is pitted and displaced. And if you say, okay, well, how would you convert this into 3D, or how would you render it in a 3D environment? You could just take a depth map, like capture the shape of the lemon as geometry, in this case a grayscale depth map, and then project a single image onto it. And you can see you have all that parallax. The lemon pits are all moving side to side, and you have that shape. But when you go into the highlight, you see that there is no retinal rivalry. It just looks like a shape with a lemon texture on it. And it doesn't really communicate to your brain that you're actually looking like at a lemon. And the reason why I bring this up is all these features are very prevalent on a human face. So you can see that just looking in the highlights in the reflections in the eye, the occlusion of the eyelashes, the different highlights in the skin, you know, the occlusion of strands of hair, one hair in front of another. You can see the separation between the tongue and the teeth and the glare on the skin itself. And all of these features are necessary for your brain to be like, okay, you know, eyes are glossy, and the eyes are glossy, that skin is a different radiosity or reflectiveness, clothes is different reflectiveness, and all of these different things need to be present for you to buy into the fact that you're looking at a person. And that's one of the major reasons why when you see typical volumetric renditions of people, or you see like a poorly converted Marvel movie, the reason why everybody looks waxy and dead-eyed is the absence of this effect. And of course, us being very broke filmmakers, we said we had to solve this problem first. We couldn't proceed with anything else until we said we have to solve this problem. So we ended up raising a modest Kickstarter in order to kind of research and develop and lock in our camera system, which we've kind of named the S3DD system, which is a terrible name. And the big thing that was important for it is it had to be small and compact so that we're able to, like, it's a regular camera footprint and we're able to shoot like a regular interview. And that's important to not overwhelm and intimidate our subjects and make sure that they feel comfortable that, okay, I'm not going into this giant stage. It just feels like, a regular, what I'd expected this to be. And also the fact that we can travel with it, we can pack it into luggage and take it with us instead of saying, like we did one of our interviews where we had a very brief time in a soundstage because they're like, hey, I've got this soundstage available. Can we use it to interview somebody with their schedule? And then bringing them through CineSpace and like, oh, we're going by, Handmaid's Tale set and, I don't remember what other film or TV shows were filming there. And then going through the big halls, going through security and then sitting down, that person is going to be uncomfortable or they're going to be thinking about all these things and not really in the space that we need them to be interviewed at. So, our system is fairly basic that we put together, and it's just two 4K Sony cameras where we had to make the choice between do they need to be synchronized and gen-locked or do they need to be affordable because we need, multiples of them, and also have good skin tones and good skin quality and having large sensors that have low signal noise so that the faces and the skin tones and the colors and the hair and everything have the most natural tonality when you look at it. Also, the Kinect version 2, the Xbox One Kinect, is still the best depth sensor on the market. There is a version 4 that's coming out this fall, which will bring forward a lot of the things that make this one better. And then the depth sensors tethered into a laptop, and we just use an off-the-shelf program to record our depth streams. And then we bring it into a compositing software. We used to use Nuke, but that's way too expensive, so now we use Blackmagic Fusion. And we composite basically the left image, the right image, and the geometry that we captured. And then we create the thing on the right there, which is something called the texture atlas that has a left image, a right image, and a depth map in it. And then what that means is that because we've projected onto the geometry, we now have a version of the scene where all the retinal rivalry is still there, but very little parallax is still there. Like there's small amounts of parallax in the hair, different highlights, and those small details come across stereoscopically when you look at it in VR, but the actual shape of the person is represented in geometry. And because of that, we can just cut it like regular video. We have the texture atlas, we can edit it, we can log it, we can caption it, we can treat it just like a regular video pipeline. And then we bring it into the engine, and we bring a shader that then reads out the different pieces of the atlas, and that drives the effect in the engine that displaces a mesh, and it makes it very lightweight rendering and able to run on future platforms like, not future anymore, but things like the Oculus Quest. And the infrastructure, because we're just using video infrastructure, it's just a video clip that's playing, it's actually, unlike something, not to harp on it, the Intel studios, where data set is incredibly small. Like our volumetric video files are smaller than a 360 video. They're basically just a regular, just a little bit more than an HD video. And because we're only concentrating detail on the front, our resolution for what a human face is able to overdrive what the pixels on your VR display is. So you're not looking between sampled bits of detail. When you're looking at it, every pixel is representing something in the video, which makes the faces look sharp and crisp. Now the obvious question is like, well, why didn't you just do it as 3D 360 video? And that's actually something that we started with, but as many of you already know about Sixed Off, there are really big problems with representing 3D this way. Of course, you roll your head to the side, and because your virtual eyes aren't displacing from what was recorded by the 3D camera, you get a huge amount of vertical disparity, which builds up massive amounts of eye strain as your eye fights to try and make the image look right. And then, of course, you don't have the... No, that GIF's not playing. But so you don't have the 6 degrees of freedom that you can't lean forward or lean back, and that your body language isn't represented, which is an important part of the fundamentals of body language, right? Like you'll lean in to listen to somebody closer, you'll lean back to catch some distance, to think about what somebody's saying, you might lean to the side to consider or look back in your own memory, and all of these things, if you're not able to do that with the subject matter representing in space correctly, and they just move with you like you're on an Oculus Go or on like a Gear VR, it destroys the illusion that it feels like a different person. So then our system is able to say you've got both stereo and you can move freely in space, and the illusion that it's another person, the bidirectional presence, isn't destroyed. And then this is kind of an example of how the technology's evolved. Like that on the left is what it looked like when we were just using some GoPros and an older Kinect. And then on the right is how it's iterated over time.
And the difference is, I don't know how many of you were able to see our demo that we are having at the booth. So go back. So is it running? He keeps switching my slides.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, so the girl on the left, whoever watched our prototype with me talking, this is the same technology from a year and a half ago. And you see, for example, that her hands are very, very wavy and some other stuff. And the lady on the right, this is actually not the version that it's the current one, because we just updated it a week ago, and there's like, here is some boiling on her torso here and here. And on the current version, we don't have it anymore. But still, when we were working on it, the big question for us was how good it has to be to carry our message and to make our experience good enough for the message that we want to share. And also, because it always can be better, everything always can be better, but we have to stop at a certain point because we want to have it done. And so this is one reason. Another reason is we are two people's team. We work in the evening and on the weekends, and that's it. And we ran Kickstarter campaign 15K a year and a half ago. It's long time gone. So we also have to know what we can afford time-wise, resource-wise, and make all this decision shooting on a budget pretty much. But speaking about shooting on a budget, we sometimes were pretty afraid, okay, how it will come out and which decision is good and which decision is not. And we discovered that some stuff that we were actually thinking that will not work out much more, both technically and also for us, for the storytelling, for me as director and the people who are there with me as the storytellers. And one of the things is when we were first checking all the existing technologies, to record, I believe, so we record interviews for 4 hours. To go to Windows Mixed Reality Studio and record there for 4 hours, not counting the flight, the hotel, going to LA and bringing whoever is willing to go with us for a few days, $24 million for one interview. We shoot 10 interviews at least. Well, if somebody...
Yeah, if you have that money, I'll give you our direct deposit form.
Yeah, but so this is one thing. But so that's why pretty much we started working on our technology. But then we discovered, okay, we actually can make it much better for our goals. And adding stereoscopy, for example, it's working much better for us because we have much more realistic image actually. And so this is one thing, and then another thing. So the reason also why we run Kickstarter, and you probably may ask why we are not funded by anyone. So we applied to various grants here in Canada, Ontario, and federal, and we kept hearing, and I don't want to make any face to it, but I will make a face because I cannot stop myself. We kept hearing that abortion is not an issue, and I will tell you, just look at the South border now and tell me that abortion is not an issue. And we've been hearing it for 2 years. Or another story that we would hear, like suggestion or advice, would be use your skills and use this great technology for something more important than women's stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, we get that a lot, actually.
Yeah, so we've got fed up, and there were some other issues as well, like we are a VR standalone piece, and now it's changing, the environment is changing, but when we were applying to various grants, they would ask us if we have broadcaster, and there's no broadcaster for VR. So stuff like that, that's why we run very moderate Kickstarter, and we made many decisions to for the budget, pretty much. And for example, we wanted to start with one of our best favorite filmmakers, Errol Morris style. So we wanted, when I'm interviewing the person, I wanted to look eye to eye to keep her eye line, then for you to watch it in VR and to have an impression that she's looking at you. But we didn't have money for this system. So what we did instead, is it now showing? It will pop up in a second. Yeah. So what we do instead, if we set up the shooting space where I'm just behind the camera, and I actually hide behind the camera so the person has an impression of talking to me eye to eye. And we discovered, they told us, like I was thinking, should I be like moved here so the camera is here, me here, and they would keep losing the eye line? But no, I hide it here, and they said, you know what, it was great, because yeah, I know you, I trust you, we talked for many days and hours, but then recording it, answering to sometimes heavy questions, and I'm there alone. I see your silhouette, so they see me, and they have this anchor and feel safe, but they are on their own with their thoughts, and they are able to go much deeper into their emotions and whatever they need to share. So this was budget decision, and it came out really well for us. And then another thing is, I don't know if you see.
Yeah, so the system,
This is Tom.
yeah, the system for the depth camera records onto a laptop, and a big problem with that is with any VR-capable laptop is once it starts doing the VR-capable part, it sounds like a hairdryer. So a big problem was, and we actually, Charles Street Video has been a really great partner with us in that we're able to use their classroom space, but it's such a big, and that's where some of these interviews were filmed. The laptop has to be in the room. There's a limit to how far away the sensor could be. So I would build these giant table-like constructions with, cloth over it to try and absorb some of the sound. And it actually made a huge difference for our subjects because they felt like I was no longer in the room. I would come, I would clap the camera, hit record, make sure everything was fine. I would go behind a thing, and I would just cease to exist. And it was really great to also play into that feeling like they're just with themselves with the camera. And that was just a side effect of us not having any other option.
Yeah. And another thing that we would love to have initially was a sound person. One of my first jobs in Canada was miking people and taking care of that, but it was a few years ago. And we cannot afford the sound person. And so we mic them, and then we don't have hair and makeup. We would love to make them look better for the light and stuff. We don't have anybody, we don't have PA, we have nobody, we have us. And first we were thinking, okay, they will think that we are poor and they will look like at us that we're so pathetic or whatever. But then actually the most important part is the chemistry between two of us, so our trust, and we are talking very emotional and heavy subject. And these people, they are not like professional advocates. We talk to regular people who share their stories for the first time. And for them, just being there only with us and nobody else is much better. And for me, it's also another thing because sometimes there are very emotional situations and I have to deal with it somehow, both myself and with the people. And if you have anybody else around you, you are thinking, even subconsciously, that they judge you, they think that, oh, you are doing it wrong or whatever. You're thinking about them, even if you don't want to. And now I just have Tom, me, and the person, so I can focus completely on the person. So all of that stuff comes just from lack of money, but they work for us.
I guess we kind of covered all that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
but yeah, the big important thing for us too is that something that's different from what a lot of other people do with volumetric video is that it is the fact that you're not dealing with professional performers, you're not dealing with public speakers, you're not dealing with somebody who's used to the process. So every little component that you add on top of it is another level of nerves. It's another thing to get them worried that there's something wrong, that there's something not functioning. The best thing that you can do for them is to make it feel like that they sit down, they speak, nothing's wrong, everything's fine. They just are comfortable. There's nothing they can do that would interrupt it, and then it's over.
But also another aspect of shooting on this budget is that, so I need to warm them up, the people, and they need to take time to, like I ask the same question over and over, like change the order and stuff, and we go deeper and deeper and deeper. And if I would be shooting for those $24 million, I would be thinking every second. Every second.
Can you say that shorter? Could you skip over that part?
Go there? Yeah, and I don't need to do that because so we shoot in like every 30 minutes, we just switch battery and that's it. And I have 4 hours, 6 hours, how much time I need, I just have it.
And another kind of side effect too, which is just a fun little story, is that we actually, when I was talking about the thing when we were shooting in that big film studio when we had it available, we were using like big expensive equipment and big expensive materials and grip and lighting materials, and we're actually, and I don't have that frame here, but we're using like what you would use as a big black cloth on set. And the way that a depth camera, typical depth camera works that are active depth, is they use infrared light. And if you look on the left there, that's what actually the infrared looks like. And when you use high quality, expensive duvetine cloth, it actually absorbs the infrared and it makes it impossible to see. And then when we're thinking, okay, you typically think when you're interviewing somebody, oh, you know, if you don't wear bright clothes or don't wear anything green if you're green screen. For us, it's like, hey, what kind of fabric is it? Is it going to be something that's going to be invisible to the infrared? Because that is kind of a little sidestep that you have to be thinking, yeah, we've got a person to think about, we have the image, we have the lighting, we have the sound to think about, but then we also have to think about the infrared spectrum, which has been a little bit of a learning experience for us. And another important aspect that I don't think we mentioned before is that it was really important that when we locked in our technique, that the first interview and the last interview looked the same. Like it wouldn't be fair to somebody early on. It's like, oh, your interview kind of looks like a hologram because we didn't know what we're doing, and later on it looks pristine. It needs to look universally consistent throughout the entire project.
Yeah, and we're mentioning it also because we logged our technique pretty much in November, December, and since then we've been shooting more and more interviews here in Toronto. And now our next goal is actually to go where stuff happen a lot. So yeah, as I said, when we were starting, many people told us that abortion is not an issue in general, also that in Canada it's not an issue, and it's like we're running out of time, so I will not be talking much about that, but it is still an issue here, and it's also growing here politically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things where in America it's been a useful thing to galvanize both bases to talk about, and with the upcoming federal election in Canada, we're starting to see that, hey, this is something that can hit politically here too, so it's not just an American or European problem.
Yeah, so our next goal is now we actually want to use, with the political climate changing, we want to use it and now go to both US physically and shoot the interviews. We have a few people scheduled there already to shooting, but also we now want to apply to some both private and
public
funders, both here and of course in US. So these are our next steps. Yeah, so first we are shooting in US and then
shooting in the US, and then a big important thing for us is also finishing the experience, because it's one of those things where documentaries can take a long period of time, and it's you know, if you ever saw like that Netflix series like Making a Murderer that took them like 20 years to make that. But the thing is with VR now, and because you're in a technical space, there is a worry that, you know, when we started this early on, we were looking at 360 video and distributing on cardboard, and now we're saying, hey, this project would be great for the Quest. It's like, oh, what's going to happen, you know, if we continue to work with this sort of technology and we let the technology race in front of us, then it might make our project more difficult to connect with audiences.
Yeah, and so I think that's it.
Yeah, we're running out of time, but I think we have time for a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Hi. I like the solution for volumetric shooting that you came up that you're using. It's very elegant. When HD was first being released, or the next distribution method for broadcast, we still needed to do standards conversion to the 4:3 frame. And you brought up the point about funding bodies who were asking if you had if there was a broadcaster who was giving you a license. Similarly, maybe not for this project specifically, but I wonder if people that are working within the realm of shooting 360 or VR also need to think about standards conversion to reach a broadcast audience, let's say, or another venue or streaming or whatever the case is. And if you have some backwards compatibility, and you know, if you're shooting volumetric, can the media from, say, a single camera or how you format it also give you a broader license?
I guess one of the interesting things that we didn't touch on is that because we started with 3D 360 video, we were thinking about a lot of the experience in that way. And one of the things that we kind of realized as we go along is like, well, once the virtual environment's finished, you can then go out and say, okay, instead of taking the interactivity out of it and saying just run the experience and render each frame and then bake that into a 360 video. And I think that's really important for us is accessibility, because while, yeah, the 6DoF is what VR should always have been, the vast majority of people out there either have, a cardboard device, or they watch 360 video just with their phones, and having a baked down reduced version I think is an interesting opportunity, an important avenue to think of. While it doesn't capture the by present experience, it still gives them an avenue to get into it. And also doing a traditional interview out of that is another thing that we've been thinking about, because we do have like a single 4K video stream.
And it's also because of the amount of material that we have. So each interview is about 3-4 hours. A quick one is 3-4 hours. And I asked them about like 100 questions each. And for the VR experience, the base one, that it's like with you embodying the person, then going through interactive conversation and stuff, I think like today, like we have to think about how audience is used to it, who is already like able to spend some time in VR and for how long. So we are thinking now 20, maybe 25 minutes, but for sure not longer. And we also want to, especially the more emotional stories that are less general and more hard pretty much, we want to add them, I don't want to say chapters, but like that if you want to go more, there will be some little description what this story is about, and you can go for that. But also it's still like only up to probably, I don't know, 1 hour or something. But we also want to use all this material and put it on the website with question, answer. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. No, are we out of time?
Let's take one more from Ellie.
Well, that's actually, the question was, how long do we anticipate the final piece to be? That's something that's actually kind of changed over time, because first everyone is like, oh, you only have, 10 minutes before people get headaches. And then you're like, oh, how many people can you run through a festival? And now we have people like really even Secret Location doing like 30-minute long narrative experiences. So it's kind of like the envelope is being pushed. And one of the other ideas that we've had, because we're still in development, is maybe doing it as segmented episodes, that you have, a certain piece that you watch, a certain piece that you watch, that can then be combined into a longer piece.
But it also will vary, because if the conversation is interactive and you are choosing how many questions you want to have answered, then like you can finish after 2 or 3, or you can stay there for 10 or 15. So this will vary. Yeah.
I think it's-
Thank you.